Something isn't adding up in Cleveland, and fans are starting to notice. Every week, the conversation around the Cleveland Browns sounds the same on the surface. Missed blocks, blown assignments, and a quarterback under constant pressure. But when you slow the tape down, rewind certain plays, and actually watch who's blocking who, the story starts to feel a lot darker than simple incompetence. Because this isn't just about a young quarterback taking hits. Ever since Shedeur stepped into the starting role, the protection issues haven't just continued, they've gotten louder, messier, and harder to explain away. We're talking about defenders running through untouched, linemen looking the wrong direction, key moments where effort seems to vanish at the worst possible time. And the scary part, these aren't isolated clips. They keep showing up week after week in critical situations. Fans online aren't just frustrated anymore, they're confused. Some are asking how a professional offensive line can miss assignments this badly. Others are going further, speculating whether something behind the scenes is bleeding onto the field. And while none of that has been proven, the sheer volume of these breakdowns has pushed this conversation into uncomfortable territory. Former quarterbacks have started pointing things out on tape. Analysts are hesitating mid-sentence like they don't want to say what everyone else is already thinking. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to dismiss it as rookie growing pains or bad luck. Because when protection collapses this consistently, at some point, people stop asking what went wrong and start asking why. And once those questions start circulating, they don't stay quiet for long. The moment everything shifted didn't come with a headline or a press release. It happened quietly, right after the Cleveland Browns made the decision to hand the offense over to Shedeur. On paper, it looked like a standard transition, a young quarterback stepping in, learning on the fly, taking his lumps. But almost immediately, something felt off. The pressure wasn't just heavy, it was instant. Defensive linemen were getting home before routes could even develop. Blitzes weren't disguised, yet they weren't picked up. And instead of improving with reps, the protection somehow started getting worse. What raised eyebrows wasn't just that Shedeur was getting hit. Rookie quarterbacks get hit all the time. It was how he was getting hit. Free rushers coming untouched through the A-gap. Edge defenders barely slowed down. Linemen engaging air while defenders ran straight past them. These weren't complex defensive schemes fooling a young passer. They were basic breakdowns that shouldn't happen at this level. The turning point for many fans came during that game against the Baltimore Ravens. That's when the narrative officially cracked. On multiple snaps, Shedeur barely had time to plant his back foot before collapsing pockets forced him to scramble or take punishment. And instead of adjusting protections or simplifying assignments, the same issues kept repeating. That's when analysts started slowing the tape down. Not to critique Shedeur, but to understand what the offensive line was actually doing. And the deeper they looked, the harder it became to ignore. Missed switches, poor communication, linemen drifting toward the wrong defender, plays where effort seemed delayed, hesitant, or completely absent. It wasn't just one bad lineman or one bad quarter. It felt systemic. Fans noticed it too. Social media filled with screenshots, freeze frames, and side-by-side comparisons. People weren't yelling anymore, they were asking questions. How does this keep happening? Why isn't it getting fixed? And why does it always seem to happen at the worst possible moments? That's when the conversation shifted from frustration to suspicion. Because once fans stop debating stats and start dissecting body language and effort, the trust is already eroding. And from that point on, every missed block stops looking accidental and starts looking intentional, at least in the eyes of the people watching. And that's where this story really begins. As the clips kept piling up, the conversation around the Cleveland Browns started shifting, not because of fans yelling online, but because former players began choosing their words very carefully on tape. That's when Chase Daniel stepped in. Instead of doing what analysts usually do, blaming the quarterback for holding the ball or missing reads, Daniel's breakdowns took a different tone. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound dramatic. If anything, he sounded hesitant, like someone realizing mid-analysis that what he was seeing didn't quite make sense. Play after play, he pointed out the same issues: protection collapsing immediately, miscommunication up front, and defenders getting through lanes that should never be open. And the key detail: these weren't exotic blitzes or trick looks. These were standard fronts that NFL linemen see every single week. What stood out most was when Daniel highlighted moments where Shedeur Sanders was doing extra just to survive the play, sliding protection with his eyes, adjusting on the fly, even throwing his body into blocks on misdirection plays, something quarterbacks are rarely asked to do, let alone praised for. Daniel called it effort, but the unspoken part was louder than the compliment. Why does the quarterback look like the most urgent blocker on the field? As more analysts chimed in, the language became even more cautious. Phrases like, "they didn't really help him out there," started popping up repeatedly. No one said sabotage. No one made accusations. But the pauses, the rewinds, and the slow-motion breakdowns told their own story. Because analysts know the difference between bad execution and something deeper. Missed blocks happen. Even blown assignments happen. But when linemen hesitate, double the wrong defender, or appear late to engage, especially on critical downs, that's when former players stop blaming talent and start questioning cohesion. And viewers picked up on that shift instantly. Fans noticed analysts choosing not to finish certain sentences. They noticed how quickly conversations moved away from responsibility and into vague phrasing. It felt like everyone was circling the same conclusion without wanting to be the first to say it out loud. That's when speculation really took off. Because when respected voices stop criticizing the quarterback and start defending him indirectly, it signals something bigger is going on. And once that door opens, it's almost impossible to close. And just when it felt like the conversation couldn't get more uncomfortable, the screenshots started circulating. At some point, the debate stopped being about opinions because the clips spoke for themselves. Once fans started freezing frames and reposting slow-motion breakdowns, the conversation around the Cleveland Browns' offensive line took on a completely different tone. These weren't cherry-picked moments anymore. They were happening in real time, in crucial situations, against standard defensive looks. One clip in particular made people pause. A clean pocket should have formed. Instead, a defender came through untouched while a lineman stood flat-footed, eyes locked not on his assignment but on Shedeur Sanders himself. Fans replayed it again and again, asking the same question: who is he blocking? There was no stunt, no late shift, no excuse that made sense. Then came the fourth down plays. Short yardage situations where effort matters most, where linemen are supposed to fire out low, hit first, and protect the play at all costs. Instead, viewers saw hesitation, a false start-like movement that never got called, a lineman diving forward without actually making contact, another defender slipping through untouched like the line wasn't even there. Individually, any one of these plays could be brushed off as a mistake, but fans weren't looking at them individually anymore. They were stacking them side by side, different games, different opponents, same results. That's when frustration turned into disbelief. People noticed how often Shedeur was the first one reacting to pressure, how he had to bail early, absorb hits, or throw the ball away before routes even developed. Meanwhile, receivers were still mid-break, unaware the play was already dead. The disconnect was impossible to ignore. And the worst part, these breakdowns weren't happening late in blowouts. They were happening on third downs, on fourth and short, near the red zone, moments where execution matters more than talent. Social media exploded with slowed-down clips, telestrator drawings, and side-by-side comparisons with other teams running the same concepts successfully. Fans weren't just angry, they were confused. How does a professional offensive line repeatedly fail basic assignments without adjustment? That's where speculation started creeping in carefully, quietly, and always framed as questions. Is it coaching? Is it communication? Is there tension in the locker room? Or is this simply a unit that's checked out? No one had answers. But once fans see something they can't unsee, the damage is already done. And what made it even harder to swallow was what came next: public praise that didn't seem to match the tape at all. There was one play that took the conversation from heated to explosive, and it happened in a moment where there was no room for confusion. 4th and short, borderline red zone, the kind of situation where every lineman knows exactly what's coming and exactly what's expected. This wasn't a complex look, no disguised pressure, no late defensive shift, just a must-win snap for the Cleveland Browns. And yet, what unfolded left fans stunned. As the ball was snapped, eyes immediately went to the right side of the line. Jack Conklin appeared to move early, a subtle flinch that looked a lot like a false start. No flag, no whistle. The play continued. But instead of recovering and engaging his assignment, Conklin lunged forward in a way that didn't actually block anyone. It looked aggressive, but it was empty, almost theatrical. On the other side, Joel Bitonio didn't fare much better. Rather than anchoring and sealing his gap, he slipped, fell, and took himself completely out of the play. 2 defenders shot through untouched. No chip, no delay, just a straight path to the quarterback. Shedeur Sanders never had a chance. The play was over almost instantly, and that's when fans stopped debating mechanics and started questioning intent. Online, the term sabotage began trending, not as an accusation but as a question. How does this happen on 4th down? Why do multiple linemen fail on the same snap? And why does it keep happening in critical moments? To be clear, there's no proof of anything deliberate, no investigation, no confirmed wrongdoing, but perception matters, and this play shattered a lot of trust, because even casual fans understand effort. They know what it looks like when a lineman gets beat versus when a lineman doesn't fully engage. What made it worse was the body language after the play. No visible frustration, no immediate regrouping, just a quiet reset as if nothing unusual had happened. That silence spoke louder than any missed block. From that moment on, every previous clip was re-examined through a different lens. Fans weren't just asking what went wrong anymore. They were asking why it keeps happening when it matters most. And once that question enters the conversation, it doesn't go away easily. Especially when what followed next only made the disconnect even harder to explain. What happened next is where the confusion turned into outright disbelief. While fans were replaying clips frame by frame, pointing out missed assignments and untouched rushers, the public messaging from inside the Cleveland Browns went in the complete opposite direction. Instead of accountability or acknowledgement, praise started pouring in, specifically toward the very players fans were questioning the most. That's when eyebrows really went up. In press conferences, coaches spoke glowingly about the offensive line's effort and leadership. Joel Bitonio, in particular, was singled out as a tone setter. Words like warrior, selfless, and elite were used to describe his play. One coach even suggested that if people didn't see Pro Bowl-level performance on tape, then they simply weren't watching closely enough. That statement didn't sit well with fans because they were watching closely. They had the clips, they had the screenshots, they had the slow-motion breakdowns showing missed stunts, poor hand placement, and moments where defenders walked through gaps untouched. The disconnect between what fans were seeing and what they were being told was impossible to ignore. And that's where the trust gap widened. Because when public praise directly contradicts visible results, people start wondering who the message is really for. Is it meant to boost morale? Is it damage control? Or is it an attempt to shut down a growing narrative before it spirals further? Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders continued taking hit after hit, often without comment, without complaint, and without public defense from the organization. That silence became part of the story. Fans noticed how rarely his name came up when discussing solutions, adjustments, or accountability. Instead, conversations felt carefully rerouted away from the obvious issues. Online, the tone shifted again. This wasn't just frustration anymore, it was skepticism. Fans began questioning whether internal politics were influencing public statements. Some speculated that veterans were being protected from criticism. Others wondered if admitting problems up front would force changes. No one wanted to make midseason. To be clear, none of this is confirmed. These are perceptions formed by patterns, timing, and messaging. But perception matters, especially in a league where credibility is everything. Because when the tape says one thing and the podium says another, fans stop listening to words and start trusting their eyes. And once that happens, every future statement gets filtered through doubt. Which is exactly why the next phase of this story became even more uncomfortable. Because people stopped asking whether the line was struggling and started asking whether anyone inside the building was being fully honest about why. At this point, the conversation stopped being comfortable, even for people who wanted to defend the situation. Because once mistakes repeat this consistently, fans naturally start splitting into two camps. One side believes what's happening with the Cleveland Browns' offensive line is pure incompetence, poor coaching, bad communication, and a unit that simply isn't clicking. That explanation feels safe, familiar, easy to accept. But the other side, they're asking harder questions. Not making accusations, but raising eyebrows. Fans started pointing out how these breakdowns don't always look random, how they show up in high-leverage moments, how the same players are involved, how adjustments never seem to stick, and how, despite public praise, the on-field results never match the messaging. That pattern is what fuels speculation, not emotion. Online, people began asking whether there's tension in the locker room, whether some veterans are frustrated with the direction of the team, whether a young quarterback like Shedeur was truly embraced or simply tolerated. Again, none of this is proven, but it's being discussed because silence leaves space for interpretation. There's also the effort question. NFL fans understand talent gaps. They understand missed assignments. But effort is different. When linemen hesitate off the snap, fail to engage fully, or look late reacting to pressure, it creates a visual that's hard to explain away. Former players have hinted at this without saying it outright, choosing words carefully, redirecting blame, or stopping short of full conclusions. And that restraint speaks volumes. Because when experienced analysts don't rush to defend obvious mistakes, viewers sense there's more context they're not getting. That's when phrases like checked out, disconnect, and internal issues start circulating, not as facts, but as theories born from repeated patterns. To be clear, there is no confirmed evidence of intentional wrongdoing. No report, no whistleblower, no league statement from the National Football League. Everything being discussed at this stage exists in the realm of speculation and perception. But perception matters, especially when it spreads faster than official responses. Because the longer these issues continue without clear correction, the harder it becomes to control the narrative. Fans don't need proof to lose trust. They just need consistency, and right now, the only thing consistent is the breakdown itself. Which is why the biggest question is whether the offensive line is struggling. It's whether the people in charge truly understand why. And once that doubt sets in, the spotlight doesn't just stay on the field. It starts creeping toward the league office itself. Once speculation reaches this level, the conversation naturally drifts beyond the team and toward the league itself. Fans started asking a question that rarely comes up in situations like this. Could the NFL actually step in? Not because of wins or losses, but because of optics, player safety, and credibility. And while there's no confirmation of any action being taken, the fact that this question is even being asked says a lot. The National Football League has always drawn a hard line when it comes to integrity and player protection. Quarterbacks are the face of the league, and when one is repeatedly left exposed, especially amid visible breakdowns, it raises red flags. Not legal ones yet, but perceptual ones. The kind that make people uncomfortable. In this case, fans aren't claiming the league is investigating the Cleveland Browns. What they're saying is that the situation looks bad enough to warrant attention. Repeated free rushers, missed assignments in critical moments, and a young quarterback, Shedeur, taking unnecessary punishment while explanations remain vague. Historically, the league doesn't move quickly on things that live in gray areas. It waits for patterns, complaints, noise, and right now, the noise is growing. Social media clips circulate faster than official statements. Analysts tiptoe around conclusions. Fans flood comment sections demanding answers. All of that adds pressure, even if nothing is formally happening behind the scenes. Some fans have speculated about internal reviews. Others wonder whether the league quietly checks in when narratives start trending this hard. Again, none of this is confirmed. There's no report, no leak, no announcement. Just a growing sense that the situation is drifting out of the team's control. And that's the key issue. Because once a storyline escapes the building, it becomes the league's problem whether it wants to or not. The NFL cares deeply about perception, about competitive integrity, about player safety, and about avoiding questions it doesn't want to answer publicly. Right now, the Browns don't just have a performance issue. They have a trust issue. And trust issues have a way of escalating when silence replaces clarity. Whether the league ever gets involved or not remains to be seen. But the fact that fans are even asking the question tells you how far this situation has spiraled. And no matter how this ends, one thing is already clear. This story isn't just about bad blocking anymore. It's about accountability, transparency, and whether anyone steps in before the damage becomes impossible to ignore. When you zoom out and look at the full picture, this situation stops being about one bad game, one blown assignment, or one struggling unit. It becomes something much bigger and much harder to ignore. At the center of it all is Shedeur, a young quarterback placed into one of the most unforgiving environments in the league. Every snap, every hit, every hurried throw has been dissected in public, often without the context that matters most. Because while quarterbacks are always judged by results, protection tells the real story, and that story has raised uncomfortable questions. For the Cleveland Browns, this moment feels like a crossroads, not just schematically but culturally. Fans aren't asking for perfection, they're asking for honesty. They want to know why the same mistakes repeat, why adjustments don't stick, and why public messaging seems disconnected from what's clearly visible on the field. And that's the dangerous part. Because once fans stop trusting explanations, they stop believing reassurances. Every press conference sounds scripted. Every compliment feels strategic. Every silence feels intentional. That's how narratives spiral, not because of one viral clip, but because patterns go unaddressed long enough for speculation to fill the gaps. To be clear, nothing has been proven. There's no confirmed wrongdoing, no official action from the National Football League. Much of what's being discussed lives in the gray space between perception and reality. But perception is powerful, especially in a league built on credibility, competition, and player safety. What makes this situation linger isn't outrage, it's uncertainty. Fans don't know whether they're watching a team struggling to gel, a coaching staff failing to adapt, or something deeper that hasn't been acknowledged yet. And until there's clarity, every missed block will feel louder, every hit will feel heavier, every explanation will feel incomplete. The truth is, stories like this don't end quietly. They either get corrected decisively or they unravel slowly under scrutiny. And right now, the spotlight isn't fading, it's getting brighter. So the real question is whether this offensive line improves next week. It's whether the people in charge are willing to confront the disconnect head-on before speculation becomes belief, and belief becomes the story that defines the season. Because once that happens, no amount of damage control can rewind the tape, and fans will remember exactly when they first started asking why.